Welcome to Infinite Universe with new interesting episode. Many people have always believed that King Arthur was just a legend, a character from old stories filled with magic, knights, and swords. But something surprising happened recently that could change everything we thought we knew. In Britain, there's a very old tomb called Arthur's Stone. It's about 5,000 years old, and archaeologists have started digging there. They weren't expecting to find anything connected to King Arthur, but what they discovered has left the scientific world shocked. For centuries, people have passed down the story of King Arthur, a brave king who led Britain during a dark time. Some said he was taken to a magical place called Avalon instead of dying. Others believed he was just a made-up hero. But now, new evidence is making experts think that Arthur might have been real. In the countryside of Herefordshire, there's a cave that locals have feared for generations. They believed it was cursed and told children not to go near it. People even claimed to hear strange sounds coming from inside, like horses breathing or weapons clashing. Until now, no one took these stories seriously. Then, in 2025, a group of archaeologists began studying ancient burial sites in the area. They weren't looking for King Arthur, but when they came across this hidden cave, everything changed. The team found burned human bones, red markings on the walls, and a sealed chamber that hadn't been opened for over 1,000 years. It was like stepping into another world. As they kept digging, they found even more surprising things: shell beads from faraway places, and a hidden room that had clearly been sealed on purpose. They named the project Project Avalon because the site reminded them of the stories about the mystical land where Arthur was taken to heal. Deep inside the cave, there were markings that glowed under ultraviolet light. These designs looked a lot like ancient Celtic symbols, representing protection and resurrection, ideas closely tied to the Arthurian legend. Suddenly, it wasn't just an ordinary cave. Everything lined up too perfectly with the old stories: the sealed tomb, the special symbols, the bones, and even the location. Stories about King Arthur say that he didn't die in battle but was taken to Avalon to sleep until Britain needed him again. Some legends said Avalon was an island hidden in mist. Others believed it was a cave. This particular cave had long been called Arthur's Mouth by locals, and they believed it was linked to the legend. They claimed that strange noises could be heard at night, and now, for the first time, people were starting to believe those tales might be true. Dr. Fiona Lark, the lead archaeologist, described the moment she and her team realized how special this place was. It wasn't just about the bones, it was the feeling they got, like they were trespassing on something sacred. The soil around the area had been disturbed in a circular pattern, possibly for ritual purposes. The acoustics of the cave were unusual, amplifying even the quietest sounds. The whole place seemed designed for something mysterious and powerful. The bones were found in a stone cist, a type of burial box made from slabs of stone. These were used during the Bronze and Iron Ages. But the bones were different. They were burned just enough to preserve important materials for DNA testing, but not fully turned to ash. It looked like someone had tried to make sure the body would last forever. Nearby carvings showed symbols not typical of that time. There was one of a crown, another of a sword surrounded by rays, and one that looked like people standing in a circle around a central shape, possibly representing the legendary Round Table. Then came the most shocking discovery: a broken piece of bronze with faded Latin writing. One phrase stood out clearly: Rex Quondam, Rex Q Futurus, which means the once and future king. That phrase is directly linked to King Arthur and is found in many versions of his story. When this detail became public, it exploded online. Historians, researchers, and even amateur TikTok archaeologists began debating whether this was truly the tomb of King Arthur. Could it be the final resting place of Britain's greatest hero? Some scientists warned people to be cautious. Just because things look similar doesn't mean they are connected. Still, many experts admitted privately that they had never seen anything like this before. The cave contained tools from the Neolithic period, burial styles from Roman times, and even markings from the medieval era. It seemed like every generation had returned to this site, treating it as a holy place, as if they all knew something important was buried there. Not far from the cave is another important structure, Arthur's Stone, a large ancient tomb. It has also been linked to the King Arthur legend. Some believe it marks the spot of a great battle or Arthur's burial. The fact that both these locations are so close together, and both tied to the same legend, has made people wonder if the entire region of Herefordshire was once considered Avalon. Scientists also studied the sound inside the cave. They used special technology to map how sound moves through the chamber. They found that even a whisper near the tomb could be heard at the cave's entrance. A single sound, like blowing a horn, echoed in a way that sounded like horses or soldiers marching. This might explain why people believed Arthur and his knights were sleeping inside, ready to rise when Britain needed them again. In fact, old legends said Arthur didn't rest alone. He was said to be sleeping with his knights, waiting for a signal to wake. And when archaeologists counted the bones in the cave, they found more than just one person. There were 12 partial skeletons placed around the edges and one full burial in the center. That makes 13 bodies, 12 knights and one king. It felt like the story of the Round Table coming to life. This discovery raised new questions. If this really is Arthur's tomb, what happens if we open it? The inner chamber is still sealed. Scientists are debating whether to open it at all. Some believe it could collapse, while others think it might contain even more secrets. Meanwhile, the site has become famous. Tourists are visiting the cave, and locals are selling souvenirs with messages like "I visited Avalon." But behind all the excitement, there is a serious possibility being considered. If tests show the bones are from the 5th or 6th century, and DNA proves the person had Celtic roots from southern Britain, then we may have to accept something incredible: King Arthur was real, and we may have found his body. But this leads to deeper questions. If it is Arthur, why was he hidden? Who sealed the cave, and what were they trying to protect us from? This idea takes the story in a dark direction. Most kings are buried with honor, crowns, weapons, fancy tombs, and names carved into stone. But this burial was plain and secret. No name, no sword, no treasure. Just burned bones in a stone box. According to Professor Illa Ward, an expert in early British royal traditions, this type of burial looks like someone was trying to erase the person, not honor them. They might have been trying to hide Arthur or protect others from him. That message is chilling. It doesn't say let the king sleep, but let the crown sleep, as if the person was no longer just a man, but a symbol or even a dangerous force. And the wolf. In Celtic legends, the wolf often represents war, destruction, and punishment. This wasn't just a burial. It was a warning to future generations to leave it alone. Why would someone want to erase King Arthur from history? To answer that, we need to look at the time he lived. Around the 6th century, Britain was changing. The Roman Empire had fallen, and Christianity was spreading. Some early Christian groups didn't like the old stories about magic, druids, and sacred swords. They thought people like Arthur, who were close to the old gods and magical traditions, were dangerous. Some of these Christian groups believed Arthur made deals with spirits or used forbidden magic in battle. They saw him not as a hero but as someone who needed to be forgotten. It's possible they decided to seal him away, literally and symbolically, to stop people from worshipping him or telling his story. Several objects found in the cave match symbols from these early Christian groups, showing a mix of pagan and Christian beliefs. These people might have buried Arthur not to honor him but to make sure his memory disappeared. It's also possible that they believed Arthur would come back one day, and they were afraid of what he might bring with him. The area of Herefordshire wasn't always quiet countryside. In the 6th century, it was a place of battles and cultural clashes. Pagan traditions were clashing with new Christian ideas, and people were confused and scared. In that time, a figure like Arthur, part warrior, part magician, might have seemed like both a savior and a threat. Some saw him as hope. Others saw him as a danger that had to be buried forever. Now, centuries later, we're left with a mystery. Is this the real tomb of King Arthur? Was he hidden by people who feared what he stood for? Are the stories true that he is just sleeping, waiting to return? Or was he erased from history by those who wanted to end the old ways? One thing is clear: the cave in Herefordshire is not just another archaeological site. It might be the key to unlocking one of the oldest and most powerful legends in British history. And as scientists continue to study it, the world waits for answers. Maybe one day we will know the full truth about the once and future king. It was a time when the Roman Empire was falling apart and tribal powers were rising again. The place where this story happened was not just a peaceful area, it was a place of conflict, both politically and spiritually. It was a front line between what remained of the Roman world and the new powers trying to take control. In that chaotic time, a mysterious figure like King Arthur being buried in a cave, sealed with fire, and then leaving behind a warning for future generations sounds less like a peaceful farewell and more like a desperate attempt to control a dangerous situation. But what really makes this story hard to ignore is not just the cave or the burial. It's what local people have said. These are not random people on the internet, but elderly locals who have passed down the same legends for generations. Their stories are strangely similar, not only about Arthur sleeping in a hidden cave but also about priests and people in robes performing a strange ritual on a dark, starless night many years ago. Some even talk about a stone priest who sealed the tomb and made a promise that no one would open it again until the red sky returned. And oddly enough, it did. In early 2025, during the same week the team found the secret chamber, a blood-red aurora lit up the skies over parts of the UK. It was a rare event, sure. But to those who believe in the legend, it wasn't just a natural phenomenon. They saw it as a sign. The red sky had returned, which meant the seal was broken. It might sound like coincidence, but what if it wasn't? What if this wasn't just a burial site, but something more, a containment chamber meant to trap or hide something? One of the archaeologists, Nick Overton, noticed something odd about the cave. The shape of the chamber wasn't meant to let in light or to display anything. Instead, it was built for sound. If you stood in the middle of the room and whispered, your voice would bounce off the walls until it sounded like dozens of people chanting all around you. Imagine someone being buried alive or placed in a magical sleep there. The last thing they'd hear would be those haunting echoes, as if voices were sealing them away forever. And then there were the symbols. Many of the carvings matched ancient Celtic markings used for protection, guarding souls, or trapping spirits. These weren't the kind of symbols you'd find on a regular grave. They weren't memorials. They were warnings, magical seals meant to keep something hidden or contained. But the most surprising part wasn't even inside the cave. It was the fact that nothing had ever been disturbed. No looters had entered. No medieval pilgrims had defaced the site. And despite being connected to one of the most well-known names in British history, there were no mentions of this location in any records. It was as if the world had completely forgotten it existed. And that's where things get even stranger. In the 1100s, a writer named Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote that King Arthur was buried in a place called Avalon. But he never said anything about a cave or Herefordshire. So how did this part of the story survive for so long? Maybe it wasn't supposed to. Maybe someone tried to hide it on purpose. What if early Christian leaders or rival kings made a decision to erase this location from maps, books, and memory? They could have done it to build new churches, to promote new saints, and to push the old beliefs aside. Arthur wasn't just a man. He was a symbol, a threat to the control they wanted to keep. And if Arthur was ever found, if people believed his story was true, it could change everything. It could shake the very idea of what it means to be British. That brings us to today. The bones found in the cave are real. The carvings are real. The strange cave design, the legends, and even the warnings, they're all real. So now the question is, were those the bones of King Arthur? To find out, scientists sent samples of the bones to top genetics labs in the UK. If the DNA matches ancient Celtic bloodlines from southern Britain and the bones date back to the right time period, it could be one of the most important historical discoveries ever made. But even if the DNA results aren't clear, it doesn't really matter anymore. The story is already out. The cave has been opened. The legend has returned. And now, the whole world is watching. But what if King Arthur was never meant to be found? What if he was never truly buried? What if he's not just a legend from the past, but a warning about the future? Let's face it, most legends fade over time. They turn into bedtime stories or fun myths that help us understand history. But some stories fight to be remembered. They show up in local myths, strange coincidences, and signs that seem too perfect to ignore. And if what happened in Herefordshire is real, This legend didn't fade, it came back. Now the bones are in a lab. DNA tests are being run. Radiocarbon dating is almost complete. But maybe the most powerful clue isn't scientific at all. Maybe it's an idea that has stayed alive in Britain for hundreds of years, that Arthur isn't just a part of the past, but a sign of what's to come. Let's go back to a message found scratched into a bronze plaque inside the cave. It made the archaeologists freeze when they read it. It said, Rex Quondam, Rex Q Futurus, which means the once and future king. This phrase is more than just poetic, it's a prophecy. It suggests Arthur wasn't just a king who ruled before. He will return again. That's the core of the Arthurian legend. He didn't die. He's sleeping, waiting for Britain to need him again. Think about the world right now: global tension, political division, climate disasters, falling trust in institutions. This is exactly the kind of world where a figure like Arthur would return. Maybe that's why the cave was discovered now, not by chance, but for a reason. Now let's talk about what science has uncovered. Carbon dating shows the bones are from around 450 to 550 AD, the exact time period when a leader named Arthur could have existed. Not the polished knight in armor from fairy tales, but a rough and powerful warrior who united British tribes to fight against invaders. Historians have pointed to several men from that time who may have inspired the legend: Ambrosius Aurelianus, Riothamus, Lucius Artorius Castus, but none of them completely matched. Until now. The bones didn't belong to a Roman. Isotope analysis showed the person was born and raised in southern Britain, likely around the Wessex area. His diet was full of freshwater fish and inland crops, not what a Roman would eat. And the injuries told another story: fractured bones, worn joints, blade wounds, all signs of a man who fought in many battles. This was a real warrior. But there's more. The DNA revealed something remarkable. A genetic marker passed through the mother's line matched with Celtic bloodlines tied to nobility in early British history. That means this person wasn't just a warrior. He was probably a nobleman. A powerful figure. In other words, the bones belonged to a British-born noble warrior from the 6th century, buried in a secret chamber with strange markings, surrounded by legends that match the story of King Arthur. You might think, okay, maybe he inspired the legend but wasn't actually Arthur. That's fair. But then it gets even stranger. In the corner of the chamber, the team found another set of remains. Not a full skeleton, just a piece of skull and part of a rib cage. At first, they thought it was from an animal. But when they tested it, the DNA matched the main body. The second set of bones belonged to the first man's son. That changes everything. If the man in the tomb was a great leader, his son could have been his squire, a fellow warrior, or maybe the reason he was buried so carefully. Maybe the father wasn't being hidden. Maybe he was being protected. Maybe the people who buried him weren't hiding a body. They were preparing for something. For a return. One of the lead scientists said something off the record that gives you chills. He said, "We didn't just find a body. We found a bloodline. A royal bloodline, one that helped form the early history of Britain. That's not legend. That's real history. And now people are wondering what comes next. If this was Arthur, or someone close enough to inspire the myth, then who are his descendants? Could someone alive today carry his DNA? Genealogy groups are already working on it. People from all over the UK and even America are sending in DNA samples to check. And rumors are starting. Some say a few modern politicians may already show genetic links to the ancient DNA found in the tomb. Just imagine what that would mean. Arthur's family never disappeared. They just blended in with the rest of us, waiting for the right time to rise again. There's another theory, stranger, but deeply tied to old legends. Some believe Arthur isn't waiting for a person to find him. He's waiting for a sign, a prophecy to come true. Celtic stories say a red sky would signal his return. In 2025, a powerful solar storm caused a rare aurora over parts of the UK. The sky turned red, something locals started calling the blood aurora. Photos went viral, and then the cave was discovered. Even skeptics admit the timing is strange. During one of the overnight shifts at the dig site, an archaeologist said he heard the sound of metal hitting stone. Another thought he heard a horn, soft but clear, just once around 3 a.m. No one found where the sound came from. Locals warned the team, half joking, about the wild hunt a ghostly group of riders said to rise when Arthur's rest is disturbed. The legend says if you say his name in the wrong place or blow a horn near his tomb, he will wake up. It all sounds like fantasy until it doesn't. Because here we are. There are bones in a cave. DNA that matches a 6th century warrior from Britain. A sealed tomb with carvings and symbols, and mysterious echoes inside. It sounds like a story from a book, but it's real. And now everyone's asking, what if Arthur wasn't just a person, but a symbol? A powerful figure who returns when needed. History shows us that when civilizations fall apart, they turn to myth. Rome had Romulus. France had Charlemagne. And Britain had Arthur. Maybe it still does. There's one last piece of this puzzle. In the lab where the bones are being studied, there is still one sealed item. It's a bronze object, shaped like a scroll. Scans show it's hollow. Some believe it holds a message, a spell, or even a prophecy. The team plans to open it carefully, but others are urging them to wait. To be cautious. Because maybe it's not meant for us. Maybe it's meant for Arthur, the once and future king. This story has never been just about swords or crowns. It's always been about something bigger, hope. The belief that when things seem darkest, someone will rise. Whether that's a leader, a legend, or something beyond understanding, we'll soon find out. In 2025, a cave in Herefordshire forced the world to ask a new question. What if Arthur wasn't just a story? What if he was real, buried in secret, erased from memory, and now remembered? And if we remember him, what happens next? Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe our channel. Have a good day.